Maria barely slept that first night without her children. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Sophia's screams and saw Diego's terrified face in the CPS van's rear window. Eleanor Chun had given her a warm bed and clean clothes, but nothing could ease the ache in Maria's heart where her children used to be. At dawn, Eleanor knocked softly on the bedroom door. "Maria, dear, you need to see this." Eleanor's laptop was open on the kitchen table, displaying a video that had been uploaded to Facebook just hours earlier. Maria recognized the scene immediately. It was Henderson's confrontation with her family on Maple Street, recorded from multiple angles by different neighbors. "This video already has over 50,000 views," Eleanor said quietly. "And the comments are not what that police officer was expecting." Maria leaned closer to read the flood of responses. Instead of supporting Henderson's actions, viewers were expressing outrage at how her family had been treated. People were calling out Henderson's obvious lies, his cruel treatment of the children, and his decision to humiliate a family in crisis rather than help them. One comment stood out. "I know this woman. She works at Romano's Diner and always asks about my kids when I come in. She's one of the hardest working people I know. This is disgusting." It had been shared over 200 times. Another viewer had written, "My grandmother survived the Depression and told me stories about police treating poor families like criminals. I thought those days were over. This officer should be fired immediately." Eleanor scrolled down to show Maria more responses. Restaurant workers, teachers, neighbors from their old apartment complex, even customers from the cleaning service where Maria worked nights, all were coming forward to defend her character and expose Henderson's lies. "Someone found me on social media last night," Eleanor explained. "They wanted to know if you were okay and if there was anything they could do to help." Maria stared at the screen in amazement. She had felt so alone and powerless the night before, but apparently more people had been watching and caring than she realized. Eleanor's phone rang, and she answered with a crisp, "Chun residence." After a brief conversation, she hung up and turned to Maria with the first smile she had worn since the ordeal began. "That was Channel 7 News. They want to interview you this afternoon about what happened last night." Maria's stomach clenched with anxiety. "I don't know if I can do that. What if it makes things worse for getting my children back?" Eleanor sat down beside her, her expression serious but encouraging. "Maria, sometimes the only way to fight injustice is to shine light on it. That officer counted on you being too scared and powerless to fight back. He was wrong." By noon, the story had exploded across social media platforms. Someone had created a hashtag Justice for Maria, and it was trending locally. Video clips of Henderson's worst moments were being shared thousands of times, along with photographs of Sophia and Diego's terrified faces. Local civil rights organizations began reaching out to offer legal support. A family law attorney named David Rodriguez called Eleanor's house personally to offer his services pro bono. His own parents had immigrated to the United States with nothing, and he understood exactly what Maria's family was facing. "I've been following this case since this morning," Rodriguez explained when he arrived at Eleanor's house that afternoon. "What happened to you was not just wrong, it was illegal. Officer Henderson violated several protocols, made false statements, and abused his authority." Maria felt a spark of hope for the first time since losing her children. "Can you really help me get them back?" Rodriguez opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents. "I've already filed an emergency motion to return your children to your custody. I also contacted your employers, your children's teachers, and several character witnesses. The evidence overwhelmingly supports your version of events." What Rodriguez didn't tell Maria immediately was that the police department's Internal Affairs Division had already launched an investigation into Henderson's conduct. The viral videos had reached Police Chief Margaret Santos, who was horrified by what she saw. Chief Santos had spent 20 years building community trust and improving relations between the police and vulnerable populations. Henderson's actions threatened to destroy years of progress in a single night. She immediately placed him on administrative leave and assigned her most experienced internal affairs investigator to the case. Meanwhile, the Channel 7 News interview was scheduled for 4 o'clock that afternoon. Maria was terrified, but Eleanor and Rodriguez coached her through what to expect. "Just tell the truth," Rodriguez advised. "The videos already show that Henderson lied about almost everything. Your job is simply to let people see who you really are." The news crew arrived at Eleanor's house with reporter Jessica Walsh, a veteran journalist known for her fair but thorough coverage of social justice issues. Walsh had spent the morning researching the story and was outraged by what she had discovered. "Mrs. Martinez," Walsh said as they prepared for the interview, "I want you to know that we've already verified your employment, spoken with your children's teachers, and confirmed every detail of your story. You have nothing to worry about." During the interview, Maria spoke about Carlos's death, their struggle to rebuild, her determination to work multiple jobs to support her children, and her shock at how Henderson had treated them. She broke down when describing Sofia and Diego being taken away, but her dignity and obvious love for her children shone through every word. The interview aired that evening and was immediately picked up by national news outlets. By morning, #Justice for Maria was trending nationally, and the story had gained international attention. More importantly for Maria's immediate situation, the video evidence and public pressure forced CPS to expedite their review. Kevin Chun, the social worker who had expressed doubts at the scene, quietly provided internal testimony supporting Maria's account of events. Rodriguez called Maria early the next morning with news that made her cry with relief. "The emergency hearing is scheduled for this afternoon. Based on everything we've gathered, I'm confident we'll have Sofia and Diego home with you tonight." But the system worked faster than even Rodriguez expected. At 10 o'clock that morning, Janet Morrison appeared at Eleanor's door with Kevin, Chun, and both children. Morrison looked embarrassed and uncomfortable as she addressed Maria. "Mrs. Martinez, after reviewing all available evidence, we've determined that the children were removed in error. We sincerely apologize for any trauma this may have caused your family." Maria didn't hear anything after the children. Sofia and Diego ran into her arms, and she sank to the floor, holding them as they all cried together. Sofia peppered her mother with questions about why they had been taken and whether it would happen again. Diego simply clung to her, refusing to let go. "It was a mistake, babies," Maria whispered through her tears. "A terrible mistake that will never happen again." Kevin Chin knelt down to Sofia and Diego's level. "I want you to know that your mama never did anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and we made a big one. Your mama loves you very much and takes excellent care of you." While Maria reunited with her children, Rodriguez was meeting with Chief Santos and the district attorney. The investigation into Henderson's conduct had revealed a pattern of similar behavior toward vulnerable families, particularly those experiencing homelessness or poverty. Henderson had falsified reports before, exaggerated situations to justify arrests, and consistently targeted people he viewed as undesirable. The department had received complaints, but his supervisors had dismissed them without proper investigation. Chief Santos was furious. "How many families has he destroyed with his lies and prejudice?" she demanded during the meeting with Internal Affairs. The answer was troubling. Over the previous 3 years, Henderson had been involved in at least dozens similar incidents where his reports didn't match witness accounts or video evidence. Families had been separated, people had been arrested on false charges, and the department's reputation in vulnerable communities had suffered. Rodriguez presented the evidence he had gathered: employment verification from both of Maria's jobs, glowing character references, school records showing Sofia's excellent grades and attendance, medical records proving the children were healthy and well cared for, and testimony from dozens of community members who knew the family. Most damning was the video evidence showing Henderson's lies in real time. His claims that Maria's story kept changing were directly contradicted by recordings showing her consistent account. His accusations about drug use, child neglect, and suspicious behavior were clearly false. By the end of the week, Henderson was officially fired from the police department. Chief Santos announced his termination at a press conference. along with new training protocols for officers responding to families in crisis. Officer Henderson's actions were a betrayal of everything we stand for, Chief Santos said. No family should ever be treated the way the Martinez family was treated. We are implementing immediate changes to ensure this never happens again. The district attorney also announced that Henderson would face charges for filing false reports, abuse of authority, and violating the civil rights of Maria and her children. He would eventually plead guilty and serve 18 months in jail, but The Child Services van arrived 20 minutes later, its flashing lights adding to the spectacle that Henderson had created on Maple Street. Maria watched in growing horror as two social workers stepped out into the bitter cold, their faces already set with the grim determination of people who had seen too many difficult situations. The lead social worker, a woman in her 50s named Janet Morrison, approached with a clipboard and an expression that suggested she had already made up her mind about the situation. Behind her walked a younger man, Kevin Chun, who seemed less certain about what they were walking into. "I'm Janet Morrison from Child Protective Services," she announced, barely glancing at Maria before turning to Henderson. "You reported child endangerment?" Henderson straightened up, clearly enjoying his role as the authority figure who had discovered the situation. "Yes, ma'am. Found this woman and two young children stranded in a broken-down vehicle in sub-freezing temperatures after midnight. She claims to be homeless, unemployed, living in shelters. The children show signs of neglect and exposure." Maria's mouth dropped open. "That's not what I told you at all," she protested. "I work 2 jobs. I showed you my identification, my employment letters. Our car broke down on the way back to the shelter where we're staying temporarily." Morrison held up a hand to silence Maria, her attention focused entirely on Henderson's version of events. "Have you documented the condition of the children?" she asked. "Malnourished, inadequately clothed for the weather, showing signs of chronic neglect," Henderson replied, each lie coming easily. "The mother's story keeps changing. First she said they were staying at a shelter, then she claimed she works 2 jobs, then she said her husband died. Classic signs of someone trying to cover up a pattern of neglect." Kevin Chun frowned and looked more closely at the children. Diego had stopped shivering and was becoming dangerously listless, while Sophia clung to her mother with the desperate strength of a child who sensed terrible danger approaching. "Ma'am," Chun said to Maria, "how long have the children been exposed to these temperatures?" Maria looked at her watch with numb fingers. "About 45 minutes since the car died, but we were only asking for help getting to the Oak Street shelter. I work at Romano's Diner and at Sunshine Cleaning Services. I can prove everything." Morrison wrote notes on her clipboard without looking up. "Mr. Henderson, in your professional opinion, do these children appear to be in immediate danger?" Henderson looked directly at the growing crowd of neighbors, many still recording with their phones. "Absolutely. The mother appears unstable, possibly under the influence of substances. The children are suffering from exposure and showing signs of chronic malnutrition. I'd say this situation has been building for weeks, maybe months." "That's completely false," Maria said, her voice rising with desperation. "My children eat every meal. I make sure they have everything they need before I eat myself. Sophia is getting straight A's in school. Diego knows his alphabet and numbers. They're healthy, happy children who've had a hard time since their father died." But Morrison wasn't. Listening to Maria, she was focused on Henderson's official report and the dramatic scene playing out before the crowd of witnesses. The social worker had clearly decided that the police officer's word carried more weight than that of a homeless mother. "Mrs. Martinez," Morrison said, finally addressing Maria directly, "I'm going to need to take your children into protective custody while we investigate this situation." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. Sophia began screaming, and Diego started crying for the first time since the officers had arrived. "No," Maria whispered, then louder, "No, you can't take my babies. They haven't done anything wrong." "I haven't done anything wrong." Kevin Chun stepped forward, clearly troubled by what he was witnessing. Janet, maybe we could arrange temporary housing for the whole family tonight. Get them warm, fed, and evaluate the situation in daylight when emotions aren't so high. Morrison shot him a warning look. Kevin, we have a police officer's professional assessment that these children are in immediate danger. We can't ignore that because the mother is emotional. Henderson nodded approvingly. The children need to be removed from this unstable situation immediately. The mother has already demonstrated poor judgment by putting them at risk on a night like this. Maria fell to her knees in the snow, pulling both children against her. Please don't do this. They're all I have left. I've never hurt them, never neglected them. Ask their teachers. Ask my employers. Ask anyone who knows us. But the neighbors watching had only seen the scene Henderson had created. They had heard his accusations and witnessed what appeared to be a homeless family in crisis. Some looked sympathetic, but others nodded in agreement with the officials. Believing they were witnessing necessary intervention, one neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chun, stepped forward from the crowd. "Excuse me," she said to Morrison, "but I've seen this family before. The woman works at Romano's Diner where my daughter and I eat sometimes. She's always been polite, and those children are well behaved and clean." Henderson immediately stepped between Mrs. Chun and Morrison. "Ma'am, you need to step back. This is an official investigation. Casual observations from bystanders aren't relevant to child safety assessments." Mrs. Chun persisted despite Henderson's intimidation. "But I know she works there. I've seen her there during day shifts and evening shifts. She's telling the truth about her employment." Morrison barely acknowledged the neighbor's words. "Thank you for your concern, but we need to follow proper protocols. Kevin, please help me get the children to the van. What happened next would be burned into Maria's memory forever." Sophia fought desperately as Kevin Chun gently but firmly tried to separate her from her mother. The 8-year-old's screams echoed off the buildings as she begged not to be taken away. Diego, sensing the danger, clung to Maria's neck with surprising strength for such a small child. "Mama, don't let them take us," Sophia sobbed. "I want to stay with you. I'll be good, I promise I'll be good." Maria's heart shattered as she tried to calm her terrified children while being forced to let them go. "It's not because you were bad, babies. You're perfect. Mama loves you so much. This is just a mistake that we'll fix very soon." But even as she spoke the words, Maria wasn't sure she believed them. The system that was supposed to protect children was tearing her family apart based on lies and assumptions. Henderson watched with satisfaction as the children were loaded into the CPS van. His job apparently complete. As the van pulled away with Sophia's face pressed against the rear window. Tears streaming down her cheeks, Maria collapsed in the snow. The crowd of neighbors began to disperse, the entertainment over. Most of them returned to their warm homes, discussing what they had witnessed with the certainty of people who believed they had seen. Justice in action. Henderson handed Maria a business card. "The number for child services is on there. You can call tomorrow to find out about visitation rights, assuming you can prove you're fit to see them." Maria stared at the card through her tears, unable to process that this nightmare was really happening. In less than 2 hours, her life had been completely destroyed by a police officer who had decided she was guilty of being poor. Brooks, who had remained silent through most of the ordeal, finally spoke up. "What about her? We can't just leave her here in this weather." Henderson shrugged. "She's an adult. She can figure out her own situation. Maybe this will motivate her to make better life choices." But Mrs. Chun stepped forward again, this time more boldly. "She can't stay out here. She freeze to death." The elderly woman turned to Maria. "Come with me, dear. I have a warm place where you can stay tonight." Henderson started to object, but Mrs. Chun cut him off. "She's not under arrest, is she? Then she's free to accept help from whoever offers it." As Mrs. Chun helped Maria to her feet, she whispered, "I saw everything. That officer was wrong, and I'm going to make sure people know it." Maria barely heard the words. Her children were gone, taken by a system that was supposed to protect them. Her car was still broken down, her possessions scattered in the snow by Henderson's search. Her life had been turned into public entertainment for strangers, who would forget about it by morning. Mrs. Chun guided Maria toward her house 3 doors down. But Maria kept looking back at the street where everything had gone wrong. Henderson and Brooks were driving away, their work finished. The neighbors had returned to their homes. Only the scattered papers from Maria's personal documents remained, slowly being covered by the falling snow. Inside Mrs. Chun's warm kitchen, Maria sat at a small table while the older woman made tea. The sudden warmth made her realize how close she had come to dangerous hypothermia. But physical cold was nothing compared to the ice that had formed around her heart. "My name is Eleanor Chun," the woman said gently. "My late husband was a civil rights lawyer. I know injustice when I see it." Maria tried to respond, but no words came. Her throat was raw from crying and from breathing the freezing air for so long. Everything felt surreal, like a nightmare from which she couldn't wake. Eleanor placed a hot cup of tea in front of Maria and sat down across from her. "That police officer was wrong about everything. I could see it from the beginning. And I'm not the only one who saw what really happened tonight." Tea. The Martinez family never expected their lives to change forever on that freezing February night. Maria Martinez clutched her 2 young children closer as the wind cut through their thin jackets like icy knives. 8-year-old Sofia pressed against her mother's side, while 5-year-old Diego buried his face in Maria's shoulder. His small body shivering uncontrollably. Their old Honda had broken down 3 blocks from the homeless shelter where they had been staying for the past month. The engine had made strange noises for weeks, but Maria couldn't afford repairs on her minimum wage salary from the diner where she worked double shifts. Now, at 11:30 at night, with temperatures dropping below 20 degrees, they were stranded on Maple Street in one of the city's rougher neighborhoods. Maria's husband Carlos had died in a construction accident 8 months earlier. The company's insurance settlement barely covered the funeral costs, and the medical bills from his 3-week hospital stay had drained their savings. They lost their apartment when Maria couldn't keep up with rent, and finding affordable housing in their city had become nearly impossible. The shelter was temporary, but it was warm and safe, and Maria was grateful for even that small mercy. She tried calling the shelter's emergency number, but her phone battery had died hours earlier. The nearest payphone was 6 blocks away, too far to walk with 2 exhausted children in this bitter cold. Maria looked around desperately, hoping to see another car or someone who might help. The street was empty except for a few parked vehicles covered in snow. That's when she saw the police car turning onto their street, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Relief washed over Maria as she waved her arms to flag down the officers. Police were supposed to help people in distress, especially families with children on dangerous cold nights like this. She had always taught Sofia and Diego to trust police officers and ask for help when they needed it. The patrol car slowed and pulled over about 20 feet away. 2 officers stepped out, their breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. The first officer was tall and heavyset, with a stern expression that made Maria's stomach tighten with unexpected nervousness. His name tag read Henderson. The second officer was younger and thinner, following Henderson's lead as they approached the family. "What's going on here?" Officer Henderson asked, his tone immediately cold and suspicious. He looked at Maria and her children as if they were criminals rather than a family in need of assistance. Maria stepped forward, trying to keep her voice steady despite her chattering teeth. "Our car broke down, officer. We just need help getting to the Oak Street shelter. My children are so cold and we don't have anyone to call." Henderson's eyes narrowed as he looked at their worn clothing and the beat-up Honda with its hood slightly open. "Got identification?" he demanded. Maria fumbled in her purse with numb fingers, eventually producing her driver's license. Henderson examined it with his flashlight, taking much longer than necessary. "This address doesn't match where you claim to be going," he said accusingly. "We're staying at the shelter temporarily," Maria explained, her voice beginning to shake with more than just cold. "We lost our apartment after my husband died. The shelter is just temporary until I can save enough for a deposit somewhere." The younger officer, whose name tag read Brooks, shifted uncomfortably as Henderson continued his interrogation. So you're homeless, Henderson said, making the word sound like an accusation. And what were you doing in this neighborhood? This isn't exactly on the way from anywhere decent to Oak Street. Maria felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and growing anger. I clean offices in the building on 5th Street. I work 2 jobs to support my children. The car broke down on the way back to the shelter. Henderson walked around their car, peering inside with his flashlight. A lot of stuff in here for someone who's just temporarily down on their luck, he said loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear. Looks pretty permanent to me. Sophia began to cry softly, sensing the tension in her mother's voice. Diego's shivering was getting worse, and Maria could see his lips were turning blue. Please, officers, my children are getting hypothermia. Can't we discuss this somewhere warm? Or could you just give us a ride to the shelter? We're not a taxi service, Henderson snapped. And I need to verify your story. Brooks, call this in. See if there are any outstanding warrants. Maria's heart raced. She had never been arrested, never even gotten a speeding ticket. But Henderson's attitude made her feel like she was already guilty of something. Other neighbors in the area had begun to notice the commotion. A few people peered out their windows, and Maria felt the weight of their stares. I haven't done anything wrong, she said, trying to keep her voice calm for her children's sake. I'm just asking for help getting my kids somewhere warm. That's what they all say, Henderson replied, raising his voice. People like you always have sob stories. Probably spent the money on drugs or alcohol instead of fixing the car or getting proper housing. The accusation hit Maria like a physical blow. She had never used drugs, rarely drank even before Carlos died. She worked 70 hours a week between her 2 jobs, sent every penny she could spare to Sophia's school for supplies, and stayed awake at night in the shelter, reading library books to her children to help them feel normal. That's not true, she said, tears freezing on her cheeks. I work 2 jobs. I have letters of recommendation from my employers. I can prove everything I've told you. Henderson laughed mockingly. Letters of recommendation? Lady, you're standing on the street at midnight with 2 kids and a broken-down car, claiming to be homeless but working. None of this adds up. Brooks had returned from the patrol car. No warrants, he said quietly. License is valid, no record. Maria felt a moment of hope, but Henderson's expression didn't change. That doesn't mean anything. Brooks, start checking the car. People like this usually have drugs or stolen property. Wait, Maria protested. You can't search my car without a warrant. I know my rights. Henderson stepped closer, his voice becoming menacing. Oh, you know your rights? Well, let me tell you something, lady. You're in a high-crime area at midnight with 2 kids and a suspicious story. That gives me plenty of reason to search. Unless you're hiding something you don't want us to find? By now, several neighbors had come outside despite the cold. Maria could hear whispered conversations and felt the judgment in their stares. Henderson seemed to be performing for the growing audience, his voice getting louder and more accusatory. Please don't do this in front of my children, Maria begged. They're scared and cold. Whatever you think I've done, they're innocent. Should have thought about that before you put them in this situation, Henderson replied coldly. Good parents don't drag their kids around the streets at midnight. Sophia began crying harder, clinging to her mother's leg. Diego had gone silent, his little body trembling violently from the cold and fear. Maria realized that neighbors were now recording the scene with their phones. Capturing their humiliation for anyone to see. Brooks looked increasingly uncomfortable as Henderson continued his aggressive questioning. Maybe we should just give them a ride, he suggested quietly. It's really cold and the kids look... The kids look what, Brooks? Henderson cut him off sharply. Look like they're being properly cared for? Look like they belong out here in the middle of the night? Maria's humiliation deepened as Henderson's words carried across the street to all the watching neighbors. She could hear someone say, "Those poor children," and another voice respond, "Where's child services when you need them?" I take excellent care of my children, Maria said, her voice growing stronger despite her tears. We've had bad luck, but they are loved and cared for every single day. Henderson pulled out his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. We have a possible child endangerment situation on Maple Street. Requesting child services backup. Maria's world seemed to stop. No, please, she whispered. Don't take my children. They're all I have left. The crowd of neighbors had grown, and their conversations became a steady hum of judgment and speculation. Maria heard fragments like, how could she, and in this weather, and those poor babies. Each word felt like another nail in the coffin of her dignity. Brooks stepped forward, his voice low but urgent. Henderson, maybe we should just transport them to the shelter. The kids are really suffering from the cold. The kids are suffering because their mother made bad choices, Henderson replied loudly. This is what happens when people don't plan ahead. Don't take responsibility for their situations. Maria watched in horror as Henderson began searching through their car, pulling out the few possessions they had managed to save. He held up Sophia's worn teddy bear and Diego's coloring books as if they were evidence of wrongdoing. He found the small bag where Maria kept their important documents and dumped everything onto the car's hood. What's all this paperwork? He demanded, rifling through Carlos's death certificate, their eviction notice, and Maria's employment verification letters. Those are personal documents, Maria said, stepping forward to protect her family's private information from the prying eyes of neighbors who were now openly recording everything. Nothing's personal when you're living on the streets with kids? Henderson shot back. This is all evidence of pattern of poor decisio.